passengers travelling to the interpretation station, please alight now.
Episode 4 of the interpretation station is Call to Order. You'll forgive me, I had to improvise a little bit. I don't really tend to carry a gavel around with me. So it had to be the old IKEA hammer and this rather nice cheese board. I'll work on it for the next episode. Well, yep, we've got a cracking episode again for you today, an absolute cracker. And a first of its kind. Our first Russian language recording that we're going to be doing, first Russian statement. Now, it's not actually by Russia itself, as you can see on the screen. It is actually, we've got Belarus lined up for you. We have got, if you can read here, statement by the Foreign Minister of the Republic of Belarus, Mr. Mackey. This was at the 73rd session of the General Assembly, the general debate. Of interest here, just before we get going any further, you know, it's an important event. So in Russian, it's called the Общая дискуссия. So if you hear them talking about whatever, President Putin, он сказал на общей дискуссии в Dvonya, they're talking about the general debate. It's not necessarily a phrase you'll just know like that, so just make a note of that. Общая дискуссия. So yeah, this was delivered 2 years. This was 2 years ago. So some of the thing I know, sort of Belarus has been in the news a bit recently. The elections over the summer, various controversies, a lot of protests, and so forth. So this is still before any of that kicked off, when things were still, 1st of October 2018. So this is still before COVID, before any elections, before any protests. So, so just to remind you, the best way again for you to benefit from this, my viewers, is in the description box. You will find a link that will take you to the original statement by Mr. Mackey. You will also find a link that will take you to this statement here that you see. You can just download it from the link I've given you. And the best thing for you to do is to record yourself, and then once you've recorded yourself, watch the video. I'll go through the video with me. See what things you've got right, what you've got wrong. Maybe I've got some useful tips to give you, some useful suggestions. It's up to you what you want to take on board here. Just remember, so what my role here is, I'm not going to teach you how to interpret. That's what you do at university, at school. They teach you the techniques and things, the academic side of it. My channel focuses more on solutions we can find for words, ways to make things, ways for you to interpret quicker, how you can sort of, what stuff you can skip, what stuff it's useful to know, what are the good words in English that you can use for certain expressions, you know, what you can afford to leave out. That's my job. I'm not going to teach you techniques on practicing. That's for what you do at as I say, at college or university. So once again, so I'm going to be using as my sort of template for this. It's a recording by a student of mine, Will. We've heard from him before. He's done one of these before. He's a very good young interpreter, and so we're going to be following along with his rendition of this statement. Just before we begin, usual thing, you know, Belarus 2018 general debate. What do we think the Belarusians are going to talk about? I mean, I've listened to it, so I've cheating a little bit. But you're probably going to be thinking, okay, Belarus, so it's been close, former Soviet state, close to the Russians. Lukashenko and the president gets on well with Putin. They are, they tend to see things from a perspective kind of of the old Soviet way of thinking. That they see the world in that sort of sense. Probably generally sort of anti-capitalist, I would say. Sort of modern, the contemporary notion of capitalism. So they, it's all about talking a lot about solidarity and things. They're members of the Eurasian Economic Union. Now, this is something we will actually come to a bit later in the text. So they're probably going to talk about that. They like to talk about integration processes. They while I say that they're anti sort of capitalist, they actually there's a lot of they're quite pragmatic at the same time, and they like to trade with both sides. I mean, people tend to immediately associate them as being allies of Russia, but they don't always get on that well with Russia. They've had certain fallings out with them, and they do try and play the Russians off against the Europeans. They're not averse to doing trade deals with the European Union. They do trade quite a bit with the European Union. So they're a middle income country. They often talk about middle income. A big thing with Belarus, if they're going to, the general debate, they're going to talk about the very, it tends to be sort of big sweeping subjects, very grandiloquent subjects. So they're probably going to talk about Chernobyl, for example. They were really badly affected by the Chernobyl blast back whenever it was, 1986. They used to have, I think, did Belarus have nuclear weapons also on their soil at some point? They may have given up. I might be wrong on that. So that's a thing they tend to talk about. I should point out, so this is just going to be the first 6 minutes of this statement. The statement runs for about double that, 12, 13 minutes, so we're not going to cover it all. Yeah, those are the main things that you want to be thinking about with Belarus. So without any further ado, as we usually do, let's start with what Will has to say, what he's done. You've got the text here in front of you. You should be able to see. And off we go.
President, ladies and gentlemen, we are living in a paradoxical time where optimism and pessimisms are equally integral parts of our lives.
Okay, just a quick word. So yeah, General Assembly has a president, the president of the General Assembly. Okay, it's a small thing. We live in paradoxical times, and optimism and pessimism are equally неотъемлемым составляющими an integral part. That's a sort of standard phrase that always comes, that integral part. Okay, moving on.
Indeed, recently we have adopted very important agreements like the UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the Paris Climate Agreement.
Okay, a couple of little things here. So yes, the Russians do like starting their sentences with действительно, and the sort of textbook way of rendering that is indeed, which is fine. Sometimes I will just say yes. I'll say yes. Very recently we did adopt some very important documents. Okay, so just so as not to always say indeed, because they like to say действительно a lot, and it can sort of be a bit trying if you just keep saying indeed, indeed. So just to vary things up a bit. Повестка ООН 2030. The Agenda 2030. So, I mean, for absolute beginners out there, OON, that's the UN, okay? Organizacja Объединенных Наций. So you did know, by the way, that I think the UN was initially called the United Nations Organization. So in English, they pretty much dropped the organization bit. But in Russian, they kept it. I do believe in French, OON, À l'ONU, Organisation des Nations Unies. They kept the organization, so just in case, it's good. It's a very important acronym to know. Устойчивое развитие, sustainable development. It's a must-know sort of word when you're doing things from the UN. And Парижское соглашение по климату, the Paris Climate Agreement, Paris Climate Accords, whatever you're happiest with. On we go.
By the end of the year, the international community should give the green light to two further agreements in which great hope lies for a better future: the Global Compact for Migrants and Refugees.
Okay. He says here, международное сообщество должно дать, it should give. So what he's actually saying is really is due to give the green light. Yeah, slight nuance, but yeah, I think in English is due to give the green light. And then возлагаются особенные надежды. So I like with hope. The word I like to use with hope is I like to use vest. Great hopes are vested in this or that, or placed. I think we'll use as lie, which is pretty good. I mean, everyone has a favorite. I like to go with vest. Sounds fancy. I know. And this is, as he rightly says again, глобальным соглашением по беженцам и по мигрантам. That is indeed the Global Compact on Migrants and Refugees. And after that, after that, you can just refer to it as the Global Compact, okay? Because it's probably going to come up again. And if it comes up again, I would just be dropping the for refugees and for migrants to say the Global Compact.
Implementing these important initiatives is the most serious way of changing the lives of all countries and all people, of guaranteeing fair globalization.
Okay. I think he says important for znakových initiative. Does he say important initiatives, which is good. You want to have a couple of other words up your sleeve though for this. You can say like landmark initiatives. These they're milestones. You could just say implementation of all these milestones. Maybe anyway. Maybe you want to say milestone initiative or landmark initiative, flagship initiatives. And obviously, again, a realizacja. This isn't realization. This is, implementation, putting into practice, whatever. Okay.
Which there are no losers, of eradicating poverty, and of preserving the planet for future generations.
So again, quite a few of these sort of set mantras, if you like, at the UN. You hear a lot of these sort of cliches in the general debates. Искоренить нищету, eradicating poverty, said that very well. That is the sort of the standard format way of doing that. Сохранить планету для будущих поколений. He says, okay, preserving the planet for future generations, saving the planet, one or the other. Yeah.
Searching for answers to the global challenges, the root of solving these challenges is one that we all share together. No country can solve them by themselves. There cannot be individual progress without the progress of the collective.
Okay. Yeah. So he sort of paraphrases a bit this first half. So the search for responses to global challenges. Okay, пути решения общих задач. I mean, the Russian language speakers, they love to talk about put вперед, the path, the shining path, whatever. So I mean, sometimes you can just drop it, решение общих задач, achieving common goals. I mean, the standard rendering for zadача is task. That's the first one you're always taught. Challenge is a good one also for zadача. So meeting shared challenges, again, to stop you just from saying task every time. So clearly shows, as Will says, no country can do this by itself. There can't be individual progress without collective progress. Okay, so now move on to this paragraph.
That is why, however fair the criticism that has been levelled at the UN may be, it does represent for us a unique platform for cooperation.
I like how he says, yeah, however fair the criticism leveled at the UN. That's some very nice words there. That's very smooth sounding. You level criticism. It's a good word pair to remember.
It is a multi-sided mechanism based on the principles of guaranteeing fair and respectful relations between all countries, its people, and its needs.
Okay, one little thing I'd point out here. Многосторонний mechanism. So this is a very important concept in the UN. That's multilateral mechanism. You say multi-sided. So yeah, in the UN, it's all about multilateralism. We've got одностороннее, bilateral, unilateral, двустороннее, bilateral, многостороннее, multilateral. And this is гарантирующее равное и уважительное отношение. So guaranteeing equal and respectful отношение, treatment of all countries, ее приоритетами, нужды, their priorities and needs. So that's how I would see it. They often talk about the need for уважительное отношение, whatever it may be. So respectful treatment. Okay, let's go on.
For governments to succeed in reaching the 2030 agenda, we need an effective UN team on the ground which can help in a real and rational way to support governments on their path towards sustainable development.
Okay. Для содействия. Содействие is the way I tend to render содействие to assist or to facilitate. It's not that I get mixed up with them. I tend to see содействие и способствовать. I make a point of separating them. So with содействие, I'll tend to say, as I say, to assist or to facilitate. Способствовать, to contribute to. So I try and keep them apart so that I don't, as I say, muddle them up. So to assist states in решение амбициозных задач, so I'm meeting the ambitious, in this case it's goals, isn't it, of задач, of Agenda 2030. What other interesting expressions here? На местах, on the ground, in the field. If you want to get very fancy, in situ. Bit of Latin there. Okay, and then результативно и рационально. That is, so that the best way of doing that, it's an easy way of remembering, R and R, I mean, so in English, effectively and efficiently is you can interchangeably, but that's the best, I think, possibly solution. Effectively and efficiently. Support governments. There you go again. На пути к устойчивому развитию. So towards sustainable development.
This is how we see the essence of UN reform at the moment. Ladies and gentlemen, global.
The so he says the essence of reform of the UN system. Sut was a word I used to struggle with a bit. I think essence of all the sort of legitimate options is probably the one I least like. It's okay. It'll pass. It's a pass. A grade C we'll give it. But you've got like the substance I prefer. substance of the reform of the UN development system, or the thrust. And this is what this is where we see the thrust of reform of the UN development system. So bear those two options in mind.
Development, in order that it can be in the interests of all, directed towards the whole common good, is one of the key tasks at the moment. And there are some serious issues related to this. Globalizational processes go hand in hand with the
Okay. He's a pretty quick speaker, by the way. If you come to doing this, he speaks a fair old pace. So you have to know when to drop stuff out. I mean, I say this all the time. Dama y gospoda. Just drop it. Don't need it. Have a breather. As I say, he is going fast in this, and you don't need to say that. You can just let it go. Does Will let it go, in fact? Let's have a look. I can't remember. Does he let it go? Yeah, he says it. He says, ladies and gentlemen. I think the speed he was going at, he'd have been well to drop that. Okay, let's move on to the next paragraph.
In order that it can be in the interests of all, directed towards the whole common good, is one of the key tasks at the moment. And there are some serious.
Okay, couple of interesting tips I can give you here. Development of globalization that would, okay, учитывала интересы, with учитывала, take into account, which would often use reflect as a bit of a cheat with учитывать. It's a quick way of getting it out. You know, the development of globalization which would reflect the interests of all. You know, which could factor in, which would take into consideration, reflect is a quick way of doing that. Управлению ее на общее благо, I guess managing it for the common good, остается в числе ключевых задач. Okay, this is one of another cheat in Russian. In fact, with any language, use the word priority. So остается в числе ключевых задач. I mean, you could say remains one of the key tasks, one of the key challenges. You also just say just remains a priority. Just remains a priority. I mean, I think a priority in itself is a ключевая задача. So, современного мира. This is a nice. I've got a nice solution for this. So I like to say in this day and age. Okay, I know the temptation is to make in the contemporary world, in the modern world, and they do use this expression a lot. The Russians, the Belarusians, в современном мире, blah blah blah, in this day and age. Okay.
Serious issues related to this. Globalizational processes go hand in hand with the emergence of new geopolitical and geoeconomic lines in.
That's nice, isn't it? Go hand in hand, сопровождаться, or accompanied by. That's nice. Появлением, so they go hand in hand with the emergence of new geopolitical and geoeconomic. What does he say?
Risks, which are not only at a regional but also at a global level.
Okay, the rifts. That's very good. Rifts, fault lines, fractures. When you hear this sort of thing, think earthquakes. So all those are good. Rifts, fault lines, fractures.
They create a sort of civilizational trap where.
This is an expression that the Belarusians like to use, a civilizational trap. I don't know how else to do it, really. I just say it like that. I never really hear anyone else using this expression, but yeah, that's what it is. Civilizaционная ловушка. It's a civilizational trap. They create a kind of своеобразная, like a kind of civilizational trap.
The search for integration goes hands in hand with the emergence of fragmentation, protectionism, and even confrontation.
So the Belarusian sort of steals his thunder here. Then he goes idiot ruka bruku, so yeah, it goes hand in hand. Doesn't sound quite as good as when you repeat the same clever solution twice in two consecutive sentences. Yeah, they go hand in hand with the emergence of projevlение, the emergence of fragmentation, protectionism, and even confrontation. Okay.
Situated in the center of Europe, Belarus is on the one hand part of the Eurasian Economic Community, and on the other hand, it is very interested in intensive economic cooperation with the EU.
Okay, so this is what I was saying before. I warned you about the Eurasian Economic Union. Just before I turn to that, just a couple of other things to point out here. Situated in the heart of, in the center of Europe, or lying in the center of Europe. Zainteresowany, you can say eager for, not just you can say interested in, eager for, keen on. Взаимодействие, this is again a favorite Russian bureaucratic word, just to, obviously the сотрудничество and взаимодействие, and just again, you never know with the Russians, or the Belarusians, like sometimes, often their delegates will listen to you and they have a very fixed idea of what they want to be hearing coming out of your mouth. There's certain words that they have in their head, a one specific, a like-for-like translation, like-for-like rendering. And so just to make them happy, at any rate, when I hear взаимодействие, I'll say interaction. When I hear сотрудничество, I'll say cooperation. But взаимодействие, I'll say interaction. That way, everyone, that keeps them happy, because you'll be surprised at the things I've been corrected on when I've said things that are perfectly good English, and yet the Russian speaker, or whatever, Belarus, knows better than me, and he'll correct me. So I like to just say interaction for взаимодействие. Now, the Eurasian Economic Union. This was called, this is something you should know about. It was formerly known as the Eurasian Economic Community. It was called Evrazies. And then apparently in 2015, it name changed to the Eurasian Economic Union. I guess similar to how the European Union was once upon a time the European Community. And so this Eurasian Economic Union, it's basically a counterpart of the EU. It includes customs union, economic union, freedom of movement of goods and people, has all similar institutions within it. You can see the member states: Armenia, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Russia. They call it Евразийский экономический союз. So it used to be Evrazies. That's how I always sort of seem to remember it. But now it is the EU, I guess. Is that what the EAEU? The Eurasian Economic Union. So it's not a bad idea to just, if you're going to be working in this field, just to read up a bit, some of the background to it. There you go. So going back to the text. Where were we? Okay, so it's like what I was saying at the beginning. So they are, they're a member of this union, where I guess Russia is the main power, but they're not averse to dealing with Evrosayuz and with the European Union as well. On we go.
Finding itself at the forefront of two geopolitical poles of power,
This word here, nastikia, is actually at the crossroads. Okay, lying at the crossroads of two geopolitical poles of power. They like poles. That's a acceptable rendering.
completely feel the interaction between geopolitics and geoeconomics.
Yeah, we very much feel the interaction, the interlinkage. They like using that word in the UN. It's ugly sounding, but that's the thing, when you're interpreting from Russian, you have to accept that you're going to be using sometimes some clunky solutions. It's just the nature of the syntax of the Russian language that you're going to use some ugly words, and your sentences are sometimes going to be structured. Just the structure just isn't the same as it is when you in normal English. So.
Because of the conflict in Ukraine and the growing tensions in the regions, because of the sanctions and counter-sanctions, our country has directly or indirectly incurred economic loss. Belarus is...
I like how he says that. Несет значительные экономические потери. Incurred, well, let's say major economic losses. It's a very good collocation. I mean, the to incur losses. Very good verb, noun collocation. This expression here, pust не напрямую, is like our country. Let's see, where are we? Due to the conflict in Ukraine, rising tension in the region, sanctions and counter sanctions, our country has, albeit not directly, but indirectly, indirectly, incurred significant economic losses. So yeah, pustnie is like albeit, although not.
in MIC and one of the most open economies in the world.
Oh, no, so Will uses a very interesting expression here because he says MIC, a middle-income country. This is как средняя по размерам страна. He's actually, well, in this context, it's like, I think this is more like I think the speaker is saying it's like a middle-sized country. But certainly Belarus is often referred to as a middle-income country. I must admit, when I was doing this myself, I think I also may have said middle-income country. It's a very Belarus always talks about how it's a middle-income country, and so yes, he used an MIC. So that's the acronym for middle-income country. I would the first time you use it, I would try and get in the full name, middle-income country. It might throw off your listeners or indeed your fellow booth mates who may be relaying off you. It's a very good thing to know, middle-income country.
$60 to 70% of our GDP is exported.
So yeah, ВВП, валовой внутренний продукт, so GDP, gross domestic product.
And we very heavily depend on the exterior market and international trade.
Okay, that's right. Внешних рынков, foreign markets, external markets. So they're a big exporter, Belarus. I didn't know that.
Inter alia, for this reason, we are firm proponents for the construction of fair, defined, and indiscriminate trade architecture, both in Europe and in other parts of the world, which would be in the interest for all.
Okay, so Will uses here a sort of classic UN solution, в том числе, inter alia. That's very in vogue to use that, among other things. But I mean, I use that all the time, inter alia. And he talks about неизменно выступая. I think he says we're a firm proponent. That's a very good. It's a very nice word, proponent. If you want, so he's, if you want to sort of do a like for like rendering with an adverb and a verb. Okay, выступаем за. We support. I mean, I would if I heard this, I would probably say we steadfastly support. Okay, we firmly support. When you ever hear that, like неизменно, you want to have the idea of unstintingly, unflinchingly, or steadfastly. Постоянно is like a synonym of неизменно. Постоянно I like to have steadfast, so that's good. This word here, предсказуемо. Again, this is a very important notion for countries like Russia, Belarus, Russia. They want things to be предсказуемо, so predictable. And I'll tell you what. See, if you're in the Security Council and the Russian ambassador is talking and he says предсказуемо, and his sort of minion is sitting behind him listening in to what you're interpreting, this is very possible. This could very much happen. He will want to hear predictable. So that's a sort of there's not too much flexibility in that sort of word. And the rest is fairly straightforward, non-discriminately trade, economic architecture in Europe and in other regions. And again here, учитывала бы интересы всех государств, that would, again, reflect the interests of all states. I forget what exactly which verb he used.
And indiscriminate trade architecture, both in Europe and in other parts of the world, which would be in the interest for all governments.
Okay, he skips actually, would be in the interest, but yeah, so again, would reflect. I do like reflect for each.
In our mind, this is an integral part of this should be the implementation of multilateral integrational projects.
Okay, and again, so неотъемлемая составляющая, again, integral part. Многоуровневый. Okay, so here he's gone for multilateral. Here, I guess it's, if you're going to be closer to say multi-level integration project. That's it. They like these integration projects. When Belarus comes on, you're going to hear a lot about integration.
Because of its geographical position, Belarus is particularly interested in the converging relations of the Eurasian and the Eurasian Economic Community and the EU.
Okay. Yeah, Vasilu, because of, that's a sort of neutral, that's fine, because of, owing to, I would perhaps say, or due to. And again, so you want to, with заинтересована, again, he's gone for interested in, again, maybe keen on, eager for, сближение, I think he said convergence, converging, that's the idea.
As a forming part of the western border, in fact, between a single economic community between Lisbon and Vladivostok, and perhaps in the future even Shanghai.
Okay. So, наша западная граница, по сути, остается единственной экономической границей. So he's basically saying, the Vied you can pretty much drop. Our western border, if по сути, effectively, sort of remains the sole, the only economic border на пространстве. You can say the space in the space between Lisbon and Vladivostok. And okay, so this is a useful little phrase to know what to do with perspectivia. So I mean, it talks about the future, looking ahead. So I like to use I use going forward. It's such a naff expression. I know that you would never really say in normal speech or conversation. It's so bureaucratic sounding. But sometimes I think that these Russian statements, Belarusian statements, that the delegates want you to be using these highly naff bureaucratic terms. So for the perspective, I like to say going forward. Okay.
For Belarus proposes the idea of integration as a way of cooperating.
Okay, again, this is a very common Russian, common collocation, if you like, in Russian. Последовательно продвигает. So you could say consistently promotes. Steadfastly promotes. Firmly promote. Yeah. I mean, последовательно. I think I probably go with consistently most of the time. Integration of integrations. Последовательно выступает за. Here we got продвигает. Interesting collocation here again. If you want something different from promoting an idea to champion an idea, there's another idea.
And gaining economic growth and sustainable development on the way.
Okay. Ориентировано на совместный поиск оптимальных путей объединяющего экономического роста. So orientirованно, I would tend to say geared towards. I don't like orientate or whatever in English. It sounds ugly. So I tend to say geared. And again, this is a common theme that they use, like совместный поиск оптимальных решений, оптимальных путей. Geared towards the joint search for optimal paths for объединяющего экономического роста. Shared economic growth, unifying economic. I mean, you can say it. There's unified economic growth. It sounds ugly. I guess maybe the best sounding is shared economic growth.
The achievement of the goal of the UN 2030 agenda, in which no country is left behind, requires particular attention.
Okay, so he's paraphrasing. Повестки дня по устойчивому развитию. So, I mean, that is Agenda 2030. Agenda for Sustainable Development, Agenda 2030. I guess, yeah, 2030. So you can say it a bit quicker. Достижение цели. So you could, yeah, if you really want to be quick, you could just say achieving the SD, all that. Достижение цели глобальной повестки дня по устойчивому развитию. That could all just be achieving the SDGs. So I may have said this before. SDGs. Everyone here at the UN knows what the SDGs are. So that's one you can use straight away. С всеобъемлющим обещанием. So this word here, всеобъемлющий, so I will usually say comprehensive. Okay. You say all-encompassing, but again, it's a bit of a mouthful. All-encompassing, 5, comprehensive. Okay. Comprehensive, 4 syllables. So I like to go with comprehensive. This is a famous sort of big mantra at the UN. Не оставлять никого позади. Leave no one behind. And here is, okay, стран с средним уровнем дохода. This is the famous middle-income countries. That's the set phrase. That's how that is rendered in Russian. So these are the MICs. Does he talk about the MICs?
And international support for MICs.
There you go, the
It is this
MICs.
group of countries in which 5 out of the 7 billion people on the planet live.
Okay. He gets the number right. 5 to 7 billion people live. You could say, if you wanted to switch this around, sometimes it's when you do it like this, so it's this group of countries in which, when you start a sort of clause in English, it kind of limits, doesn't give you much flexibility. But if you just go with which, then you need to turn the prоживает. So, because проживает, the subject of that verb is the население мира. Now, if you just do with который, if you just turn into which, gives you more flexibility. But then you have to get into verb flipping. That's a thing. If you want to get really good in Russian, that's something you need to practice, like flipping. So you would say which is home to 5 of the world's 7 billion population. So yeah, you need to learn, and when interpreting from Russian, you've got to learn how to verb flip. And that's a classic example of it.
And they do have very high reserves of economic growth and global sustainability possibilities.
Okay, so here, и объективно обладает, so they have, наибольшими резервами. So again, this is an expression that's used quite a bit. What it basically means is the potential. There's a sort of this untapped potential among these middle income countries for more economic growth. I mean, the idea being that the developed economies, the US, Britain, or whatever, they've sort of reached their maximum. They sort of flattened out. There's not as much potential for further growth, whereas these middle-income countries, there's all this untapped potential. So that's what that резерва is referring to.
On the other hand, it is where 3/4 of the most poor live, and therefore
Again here, строится именно в них сконцентрировано 3/4 самого бедного населения. Again here you got to, it's if you're doing it, as a site, if you look at it here. On the other hand, it's particularly в них, there, and then you have this verb, and it sounds ugly to say it is there that are concentrated 3/4 of the poorest population. It sounds unnatural in English. So again, you want to try and keep the sort of English, keep it as natural sounding as possible. So again, you could say here, and it's precisely в них, in those countries that are home to 3/4 of the poorest population. So again, changing the verbs around.
they are particularly vulnerable to economic fluctuations, man-made and natural catastrophes.
Okay, this is now they're vulnerable to fluctuations they talk about this a lot, fluctuations in the world economy. Conjunctura, don't get that word in French as well, la conjoncture. It just means what's happening now. Don't get too caught up by that word. I mean, often you can just do it without having to actually render it. So I mean, here you would just say that they're vulnerable to fluctuations in the global economy. Impact of regional conflicts. So again, стихийных катастроф is natural disasters. That's the classic way for saying natural disaster. Техногенная, man-made. Okay, he says catastrophe. I guess disaster is slightly better.
Climate change, epidemics, regional conflicts, which can all threaten the social economic stability.
Oh, this is nice what he's done here. You see, when he was doing it first time, Will, he's missed последствиям региональных конфликтов, and he went straight into natural and man-made disasters. But you see, this is what, this is a perfectly legitimate thing to do in interpreting. He sees he's got a moment he can throw it in. He's remembered, he throws it in later. It's a very good tactic. It's perfectly legitimate to do that. This word here that just thought I'd highlight, потрясение. Okay, so he's just said climate change. Okay, they often talk about shocks at the UN. External shocks for потрясения. That's a good quick word for a solution. I sometimes talk about upheavals for потрясения.
Threaten inequality, increase inequality in these countries.
Усугубляют неравенство. He was struggling a little bit with so yeah, increase inequality, he said, which isn't bad. The idea though is that it makes it worse, the inequality worse. So exacerbate, compound, amplify. Those are the sort of words you want there.
For this reason, we think it's unfair that the progress and development continues to be measured by GDP per capita.
Okay, this term here, as he rightly says, development being measured. That's ценение, that's nice. Measured or viewed exclusively through дохода на душу населения. Yeah, per capita income. I think is the expression you want there. I think he said GDP per capita, which is close, but yeah, per capita income.
Way of measuring it does not reflect the economic, social, and ecological specifics of MICs.
Okay, that's again nicely, at the end here, doesn't reflect the specifics of the MICs, the middle income countries.
For Belarus, it is clear that faced with a multifaceted challenge, just like the challenges that face our country, we need a multifaceted criteria of measuring development, which is orientated in order to the UN agenda. Belarus considers.
Yeah, this is a really tough paragraph. This is a real. There's lots of just big clunky words here, and I think anyone would have difficulty here. Just doing if I just did a site translation here, I would say, okay, for Belarus, it's clear that the многоплановый характер вызовов, the multifaceted nature of challenges, стоящих перед государством, okay, so facing states in this category, к которым относится и наша страна, including our own country, требует многомерных критериев. Dear oh dear, requires multiple criteria. They often talk about metrics. It's a useful word to know when measuring. So it's all about measuring progress in a lot of these countries and a lot of these programs that are sort of implemented. A multimetric criteria could be maybe multimetric criteria. I mean, it's double Dutch really, but I think if you're listening to it, it sounds fancy. Multimetric criteria for development and building on their basis. Okay, so orientирование на результат. Okay, that's results based. That's a sort of classic term. Results based strategy for cooperation with the UN system agencies. Tough paragraph, that really tough.
It is that the high level meeting for multilateral discussion of these questions should be
заседание высокого уровня. They do like that. I mean, they do say that high level meeting. They use that expression at the UN. However, if I'm struggling for time, I'll say summit. That's one way of getting around it quickly. Belarus believes that the summit Всестороннего обсуждения. Okay, here he says, I think, multilateral. Okay, I think it's, in this context, it's comprehensive discussions of these issues.
Planned and for the near future, and we should give serious consideration to
Планировать созвать заседание, so to convene a meeting, to summon a meeting. Other collocations there. And this is again, they use this the expression quite a bit. Даст серьезный толчок. So I've got a couple of solutions here. Reinvigorate, galvanize. Galvanize the development and implementation of tangible measures by the UN in this area.
Trying to develop and implement tangible measures by the UN towards this end.
Okay then, so that's all for now. If you let's say there's another 6-7 minutes of that statement left on the the recording. My three sort of highlights from what Will did there that I would really emphasize in terms of words and things. So first, заинтересованность, заинтересованный. So have develop some alternatives to just interested in. So, like I say, we're keen on. Okay. Second one, this word предсказуемость, предсказуемый, very important notion for the Belarusians, the Russians. Predictability. They're very insistent on that. And the third one, this expression that we had towards the end, серьезный толчок. Like I say, I like to reinvigorate, to galvanize. One of those. It comes up a lot. So, with that brings us to an end of today's episode. Remember, in the description down there, you've got the links to what you need, to the original statement, the webcast. You've got the link to the original text. Plenty of stuff there for you to be working with. Record yourself and then watch the video. In conclusion, I've got to remind you to press the thumbs up button, smash the thumbs up button rather. Subscribe, tell all your friends about it, spread the word. And as with all good UN meetings, you know how I said at the beginning, I called the meeting to order. That's, by the way, a very useful expression to know. If you're thrown into a meeting suddenly, Russian speaker, whatever, we call to order. That's the sort of official, terminal. That's what you say. Although I've noticed here in Geneva, they often say, I declare open. And I don't like I declare open. Sounds a bit naff. I call to order. But since we're coming to the meeting now, I hereby declare the fourth episode of the Interpretation Station adjourned.
The train is now leaving the interpretation station. We hope you enjoyed your visit. Until next time, folks.